Hey all, this is Vetri Natarajan. I'm the AWS QuickSight Solution Architect, and today I'll be covering some of the new features that we released with respect to data connectors and asset management. In data connectors, we will see how you can connect with the Starburst or the Trino. So we launched it recently this month, a native connector with which you can connect to the Starburst or the Trino entities. So today we will talk about how it can be enabled, and then we'll also talk about one of the new addition to the Redshift connector, which is how you can connect to a Redshift instance using IAM roles rather than user ID and password. This gives you more secured access to your data source. And then we'll also talk about the asset management, where we will talk about the scaled shared folders that we launched a couple of months ago, but it is and we'll see how you can implement any of these features as well. Right. So when it comes to Starburst connectors, earlier we didn't have a native connector. The option that you had was either to use bring the data from Starburst using any other mechanism and put it into an S3, or load into any of other AWS data source, and then pull the data from S3 using the S3 connectors or Athena. So this month we launched two connectors respectively, Starburst and Trino. As you would see in one of the demos that I would show, you could connect to a Starburst instance using the Trino connector as well, because inherently both are same. However, we created two connectors just to make sure that in the long term, if both these products diverge and have a different set of capabilities during when you connect to them. So we have created two connectors here, and we encourage you to connect to Starburst using the Starburst connectors only. And with Starburst, you can connect to either Starburst Enterprise, which either runs on-premise or within AWS. You could also connect to the Starburst Galaxy instances. So for this demo, what I will be showing is how you can connect to one of the Starburst Galaxy instance. And the way that you can connect to a Starburst connector, Starburst is you can either connect through UI, as you will see in the demo. You can also use the API or a CLI to create a Starburst connector. There is no new API that is created as part of this one. It is just a parameter that is introduced in the existing API called create data source. So we will also see how the details of these things as well, right? So first, before we go to the Redshift, I will show how you can create a Starburst connector with a demo. So here you could see a Starburst connector or Trino connector. I'm going to click Starburst here. So to get the credentials, what you can do is I need to connect one of the clusters in Starburst. So here what you are seeing here is Starburst Galaxy UI. So you go to the clusters and click on the connection info here. And if you look at it, look at this one, you could see there are various connection details, but you can also click here on the drop down and choose QuickSight, and you'll be able to see a list of connection details that you would require to connect to a Starburst connector. Right here, I can copy the host and put it in here. And for the port, go to enter 443. For the catalog, I'm going to use sample, and user ID. I'm going to choose it from here again, the user ID. So while it validates, the way that you can create here is basically I'm connecting to the Starburst Galaxy. So with Starburst Galaxy, if you look at the connection type, it is just going to be the public network because this is one of the managed instance of Starburst. But in case if you are running or connecting it through the Starburst Enterprise, where you are having any instance running in your on-prem or so, what you can do is that, you can also connect it either through a public network or through one of the VPC connections, right? I will show it to you in an instance. So here I'm going to create a data source. Now the connection is validated. The rest of the experience will remain the same. So I can select one of these schema from the Starburst Galaxy, and then I can pull one of the tables. And let me click edit and preview data. And as you can see, the data is being pulled from one of the Starburst tables, and it has both the direct query as well as the spice mode for you to. So in that case, you could either keep your data in Starburst itself and then access it and can build the dashboard, or you can also bring it onto Splice. Let me just publish it here. So right now I'm connected as a direct query. So this is the Starburst connector. And now let me show you how the variations when you try to connect to a Starburst enterprise instance. Say for example, you click here on the Starburst. And if you chose the product type to be Starburst Enterprise, you are going to see two options. One is the public network, and the other one is the VPC connections. But the prerequisite for you to use one of the VPC connections is to make sure that in case if you're on-premise, then your on-premise network is connected to your AWS account VPC through VPC pairing or direct connect or whatever the way possible, so that QuickSight would be able to connect through the VPC into your Starburst Enterprise instance. Rest of the connection details will remain the same, except that here you could either use an IP address that is internal to your network rather than the public IP address. And both the Starburst Enterprise or the Starburst Galaxy, both are SSL encrypted. So the data in transit is always encrypted using SSL. And when you look at the Trino connector, this would also be the same as the Starburst connector. And as I mentioned previously, we recommend you to use the respective connectors, though you would be able to connect using both the connectors as of today, or you could use the connectors interchangeably. But in the future or in the long term, the things could change between the two types. So that is the reason why we had two connectors made available for you separately. Now that is one of the new connectors that we made generally available this month. And I also want to call out, now let's go to the other connector that we want to talk about, which is the Redshift connector, where you could use the IAM role to create a connection or create with your data source instead of using the username and password. So this Redshift connector feature, what it helps you is that it helps you to attach an IAM role and create a connection from using that IAM role. So as you can see in the screen here, you can create a Redshift connector, and whenever you try to edit the data source, you would be able to see in case if the role ARN is attached to that particular data source connection, then you will be able to see the role ARN and to what role ARN or what access this role ARN, role should assume whenever it connects to Redshift. So in this example, if you see here, once you attach or attach a role ARN to this Redshift connection, and it is going to assume the user as username or the groups as admin group, guest group. All these groups are something that is present in your Redshift. So whenever this data source is used to pull the data, this would have the access that is available for this user and these groups in your Redshift cluster. So though you can see all these details in the UI, in order for you to attach a role ARN to an existing data source or create a data source that connects to Redshift using role ARN, you will have to use either CLI or an API. So in this, and again, there is no new API created for this one. You would use the same create data source API, where you can now provide additional information of IAM parameters rather than using the credentials. So we will see how this can be created as well now. So with that, let me go back to my account to show you how it can be created. So before I go over and create something new, let us also see here. This is the test Redshift demo that I created and in this account. And if you could see here, when I click on the edit data source, this is where you will be able to see the details, right? So this particular data source is connected to Redshift using the role ARN. Right? And if, for instance, for a difference, if you look at another Redshift connection that I have created, say, for example, this any company brokerage, and click on the edit data source, you can see here that this data source is created using the username and password credentials. So that is the main difference that you would see in the UI between the data sources, that is using the IAM role or using the username and password. So now, again, so now what we will do is we will try to create a test data source connection using the CLI, just to show how you can create it. But before going over the creation of the Redshift, using the CLI of create data source, you have to make sure that there are certain prerequisite role being created and attached, right? So let us show here. Let me open Cloud Shell, run the CLI commands. So I'm on my AWS account and I'm going to open a Cloud Shell interface to run the CLI. Okay. So first, let me call out some of the policies and the role that needs to be attached to a role. And then we will go over some of the CLI commands to create those role and policies. So the first policy that I have to, I'll show you is that helps the role to have necessary access to pull the data tables from the Redshift. So I'm going to show the role. AWS QuickSight. Sorry, the role. Let me go to the policies, and I'm going to show you the policy that should be attached to the role that you are assuming. Right? So this is the policy that needs to be attached to any role that you are going to create. If you look at the role, this is giving access to describe access to the Redshift cluster, so that once the connection is made, QuickSight is able to pull all the table details and everything from Redshift. Right. So the first step in doing this one is you have to create a role. So you, for this test purpose, what I have done is I have created a role called test Redshift role for QuickSight. So this is an IAM role that has been created. And if you see here, I have attached the Redshift policy as well, right? So apart from this describe, you also have to attach another policy, which is going to let this particular role get the temporary credentials from Redshift for the cluster. So this is how you will avoid creating or using the username and password, but rather use an IAM role. So this is an additional policy that you would attach apart from the describe star policy. The main difference, just to reiterate, this policy will help you in pulling the data or the tables, a list of tables and other details once you make a connection to the Redshift. Whereas this policy is required for you to make sure that the IAM role that you are using to connect to Redshift is able to get the cluster credentials so that it can establish a connection to the Redshift. Right? So once you create this role with these two policies, then you can execute a command for creating the data source. So I will show you the actual connection details, the JSON file. Then you could use something similar. So if you look at this one, if you look at the details, this is the details that is required for you to pass to a create data source API call. So as I mentioned earlier, the only way that you could create a Redshift data source using IAM role is through the CLI or through an API. And these are the details that you would have to pass, right? And if you look at the details, all these details would remain as such in the previous Redshift connections. But one of the details that you see here is the IAM parameters. So if you look at this role, I have used the role of the ARN of this particular role here. Role. And if you are connecting to the Redshift using the VPCs, which is a typical way that you would connect to an AWS data source, then again, you will have to mention the VPC connection details. And the permissions is done to ensure that I'm able to see the data source once it is created. But here is the one where the difference is, instead of providing any other credentials like username and password, you are just passing the IAM parameter. Which is using the role ARN. And here, instead of users and groups, I'm just using one of the users. So whenever QuickSight is connecting to Redshift using this data source, it would have all the access that this particular user has on Redshift. Okay. So now let us say I'm going to run this query in the Cloud Shell. So I'm going to run. And let me change one of the things. So I want to create, I'm changing the data source. Here I'm going to say demo. Just to make sure that I can differentiate between the data source that I already created versus this one. Right? So I'm going to save this. Go here. And in the Cloud Shell, I'm going to create a new file to upload this data source details. So I'm going to say BI source JSON 2. And where I'm going to enter those details. Let me go over here. Copy this. Paste that. Now I'm going to save this file. Now I'm going to create, I have to create a data source using this as the reference. So I'm going to copy another command. instead of this, I'm going to use this file name here in the command. Okay. I'm going to create in the region US East one, and I'm going to use whatever the credentials or the details that are put in this particular file. Paste. Save. Okay, so I received the status 202, and I also received an ARN, and the creation is in progress. So what you can do is that now you can either list the data sources and see whether it is created successfully, or you could also use the describe data set, data source, a CLI command. So I'm going to say describe data source for this particular account. Data source. Okay. And use this ID. Yeah. Okay, I received it. And the status you can see here, the data source name ID, the ARN, and the status here is creation successful. So now and because I have the permission assigned to myself, so I should be able to directly see the data source here. So I'm going to refresh the screen, and we'll see if I'm able to see the new data source in this existing data source list. Refresh it. And you see here, I can see the Redshift demo IAM V2 data source. Now I can use this and create a data set. And you can see that I'm able to pull all the tables. I can choose one of the tables here. And so I'm able to pull the data. I can publish it now. I'll say scenes Redshift here, and then I publish them. So now, so here you can see that we didn't use any of the credentials anywhere. So I'm able to still be able to connect to the data source and using the IAM role. So these are the two key connector details, connector upgrades that we had recently. And one of the other things that I would like to call out, because in both the connectors, or in most of the connectors in an enterprise setting, you would use the VPC connections. So I would like to call out one of those VPC connection improvement that we made a couple of months ago, but I think it is worth calling it out here. So earlier, whenever you created a VPC connection, you would only be able to use one AZ, right? It is not a multi-AZ resilient. So we have changed that capability now. So if you go and look at the managed VPC connection screens now, and you would be able to see, or when I say try to add a new VPC connection, you will be now able to select execution role. It's okay. VPC ID, and you would be able to select multiple AZs, right? Minimum of 2 AZs, so that the connection to your VPC from QuickSight is a lot more resilient with multi-AZ availability. So this is another thing that I wanted to call out, though it was released a while ago. We have seen several customers not being aware of this one. So this is one of the things that you could leverage to make sure that the VPC connections are multi-AZ resilient. With that, we conclude the data connectors features that got released recently. And now we will go over another one important feature that got released in terms of asset management, but which we call as the scaled shared folders. But before we go into the new feature release, I would like to take a step back and talk about how folders are used, or the shared folders are used in QuickSight to manage the assets at scale in the first place, right? So first, let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So first, when it comes to sharing the assets, the easiest way for you to share an asset is, say you go to an asset and then click a share and share it with a specific user, right, or a specific group. But it is not scalable as the QuickSight adoption in your organization grows, or you have multiple tenants set up and you do not want to manage access for each and every tenant individually, but rather you want a mechanism where you want to share group of assets to a group of users, or say a particular tenant that you have, right? So a typical approach would be, right, the recommended way for you to manage sharing of assets across multiple teams within your organization, or in case if you are a multi-tenant setup where you are sharing dashboard across multiple customers of yours, the best and the recommended way is to use groups to group the users that belong to a particular team or a particular tenant and then you group the assets into respective folders. Say, for example, you have a marketing team or sales team or finance team as shown here. Or in case of a multi-tenant setup, you might have different analytics products, right? Say, for example, one could be a web analytics and the other one can be the billing analytics, or the finance analytics. So there could be different products that you are sharing with multiple tenants, right? So now the best way for you to ensure that each customer gets the access or the right access to the right dashboards is to ensure that you group all your assets into a folder which we call as the shared folders. So once you create the shared folders and place the assets into it, and currently you can place we'll come to that. So there are multiple assets that you can place within a folder. So once you place those assets in a folder and you share it with a specific group, then the users will be able the users in the group will have access to that all the assets that are placed in that particular folder. So this way, you don't have to manage access for individual users or individual groups with individual dashboards or individual analysis or whatsoever. So you all manage it logically at the folder level and the user group level. Right? So prior to the new feature release, there was some limitations on how much users or groups that you can share a folder with, right? We had it at the 100 principles. So by principle, what we mean is that, say you have a folder here, you can create a folder and share it with either 100 users or 100 groups in that particular account. What this has done is that if for a large scale implementation, if you have, say, more than 100 tenants or more than 100 groups in which you want to share the dashboard or the assets with, then it was not possible for you to use the same folder. So what you had to do is that you had to duplicate that folder, right? So you have, say, for example, here you have a marketing folder. And suppose, say, if you have reached a limit of 100 user groups with which you are sharing this marketing folder with, And then now you need to share it with the 101st user group. Then you have to create another folder, say marketing V2 or marketing 2, and then share that folder and include the assets into that particular folder as well, and then share that particular folder in with the rest of the groups. So this was, though this acted as a statical solution, we need some better way for you to scale across multiple tenants, right? So that is where we brought in a concept called scaled shared folders. And typically with a multi-tenant approach, you would also have another thing called as namespaces. So for each tenant, say customer A, you would create a namespace within QuickSight. And then for customer B, you would create another namespace. Now you can share this folder with, so there is no limit for you. So now you can share these folders with more principals across namespaces, right? So instead of at the account level, now the limit is being applied at the namespace level. So you can share the new scaled shared folder across 3000 namespaces, which means that, and within each namespace, you can share it with multiple user groups or multiple principals. So what it essentially makes is that it makes you to share it across multiple tenants up to 3000 namespaces. And then within each namespace, you can share it with 100 principals. So with that, now you should be able to share it with almost like thousands or hundreds of thousands of user groups within an account. So this way, you'll be able to achieve lot more scale in sharing sharing the assets across multiple customers or multiple teams within your organization. Okay. And here, the way you can create a named or the scaled shared folders is using API or CLI only. You cannot create a scaled shared folders in UI, but only using the API. Right. And again, there is no new API introduced for this one. You'll use the existing API, which is called as create folder. And there is a new parameter introduced called sharing model, right? We'll see the details of the sharing model folder thing, but this essentially tells you whether it is an account level sharing or a namespace level sharing. So if we go here and say AWS website, create folder. Oh, sorry. AWS website. Yeah. If you see here, this is the new sharing model, is the new parameter that got introduced. The options for the sharing model is going to be the account or namespace. So for the new scaled shared folders, you would have to use an option called namespace instead of account. So once you create this as a namespace shared folder, then whenever you add a namespace, whenever you create, put in an asset, you can share this particular scaled shared folder across multiple namespaces, and within each namespace, you can share it with 100 principals, right? And so these are the three features that got released recently for you to in the space of either connecting to the data source or sharing the assets using the namespaces. Sorry, using the shared folders.